Have we got Miss Ellis on the phone? We do. We're going to have Jenna Ellis come on and talk about the Supreme Court decision about the cake baker. All right. Jenna Ellis is the Director of Public Policy for the James Dobson Family Institute. Jenna is an accomplished constitutional law attorney and also has a background in criminal law, contracts, public policy, leadership, and ethics. She's appeared on Fox Business, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and then, unfortunately, you've taken a wrong turn, Jenna, and you've come here, but you'll get over it. She also has a book out, The Legal Basis for a Moral Constitution, a guide for Christians to understand America's current constitutional crisis. That sounds interesting. I will have you back to talk about that book if you will come back. But right now, I'd like to talk about this, the masterpiece cake thing. How you doing, Jenna? Thank you for coming.
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. It's a privilege to be with you today.
So let's talk, just lay this case out. This is a gay couple went to a Christian cake baker in Colorado, asked him for a cake for their wedding. Did they search him out or did they just wander in off the street?
You know, the record is not clear on whether or not this was targeted. As far as the record contains, the couple was recommended to go to Jack Phillips. He's a well-known creative artisan. And so while they did travel quite a distance, it was based on a recommendation. And I don't think that either side stipulated that this was necessarily targeting Jack specifically.
Okay. And Jack Phillips, his name is now. And what was Phillips' response?
So when he found out that this was going to be for the ceremony of a so-called gay wedding, he said, listen, I make all kinds of cakes and you are welcome to purchase anything that's pre-bought in the store, but I cannot use my creative skills and talents to make a custom design. And notably, Jack had also turned away other types of cakes, including Halloween cakes, divorce cakes, things that would be more adult-themed cakes. So this wasn't specifically him either targeting the gay couple either. He said, this is just something that, according to my sincerely held religious beliefs, I can't do this. And so he declined them on that basis. And I think it's also important to note that he didn't decline the individual based on their sexual orientation. Had, for example, one of the two gentlemen's mothers come in, who is, a heterosexual female. Had she come in and asked for a custom cake to be served at a reception of a gay wedding, he would have said the same thing. So it was about the product and the service, not the individual.
So that's kind of amazing. He had also turned down cakes for Halloween and for, adult themes thing. He just said, you can buy, if they had come in and there had been a wedding cake sitting there, he wouldn't have minded. He just didn't want to create the thing for them because that was violating his conscience in terms of freedom of speech.
Okay. And he was willing to serve anything to anyone that was pre-bought and pre-made. And that was very clearly articulated in oral argument from Alliance Defending Freedom that represented Masterpiece Cake Shop. Wow,
that's pretty amazing. I had not realized that it was that narrow a thing. So now there's a commission, right? This is not this is just a commission that studies violations of rights, and they come after the guy. Is that fair?
Yeah, and this commission, I'm from Colorado, and I've been very involved in terms of testifying for the reauthorization of this particular commission, because what a lot of people don't realize is that this is just a quasi-judicial body that comes out of the Department of Regulatory Agencies in Colorado. So this is part of the executive branch. They're not part of the judicial branch. None of these 7 members are even, they don't even have to be attorneys, yet they're making findings of fact and conclusions of law based just on their affiliation with a potentially discriminated against class. So currently they're appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate to their term, and at least a majority or 4 of them out of the 7 have to be members of one of the potentially discriminated against classes, which sets up this ability to basically stack the commission with LGBT either members or associations or some type of affiliation and sympathy. And that's exactly what happened in 2012 when Jack's case went to this commission. And the due process thing about this is crazy because Jack didn't have the ability to opt out. Colorado law allowed Craig and Mullins to file their claim in a regular court or take it in front of the commission. Well, who are you going to pick when a commission is so clearly biased? Yet the respondent, the person who's targeted by this, has no ability to opt out and say, wait a minute, I want a duly authorized judge.
So this is an appalling abuse of power. This is incredible. So as I understand it, he goes before the commission. At least one of the guys on the commission compares says this is the kind of thing that caused the Holocaust. He says that religion was used to rationalize the Holocaust, which I'm not even sure is true. I can't think of anybody rationalizing. I'm sure there were religious people who did. So he's obviously biased against the guy. Plus, is this right that the commission had previously allowed people to to refuse to make cakes that were anti-gay? Is that true?
Yes, and so another Christian named Bill Jack, and he's part of, he heads up the Worldview Academy, who's also a Christian, heard about this case and said, wait a second, there's some inconsistencies going on. So he went to 3 separate bakeries and asked those bakers to bake a cake with the verse in Leviticus, for example, that talks about how homosexuality is a sin. And the commission said, no, those cake bakers don't have to participate in that kind of speech. It goes against their conscience. But yet they said that Jack Phillips had to create a custom design. So you see this hypocrisy and this very clear bias and animus from the commission against Christians specifically and pro-LGBT's agenda.
This is amazing. I mean, so they're very clearly regulating speech. Now they go before the Supreme Court, and it's a 7-2 decision that lets Phillips off the hook, but it's really narrow. I mean, what exactly did they say? What's the decision?
Yes, and although this was heavily litigated by Twitter yesterday to say what does a narrow decision mean when it's 7-2, yeah, the opinion was narrow, the vote was not. And so in legal speak, what it means is basically the court punted. The court said, we don't want to get into this because it was perfect facts to show this person, Jack Phillips, he had absolutely no bias or animus against his customers. He had a track record of declining other types of cakes that he disagreed with their message. I mean, his logo even has an artist's palette. I mean, he clearly understands his cakes to be speech. And yet the court said, we are going to very, very narrowly, meaning we're only going to take a fact-based opinion and say just because the commission treated Jack with such open hostility, comparing him to the Holocaust, which was terrible, but they said just based on the facts, we're going to overturn this, hand Jack the win by a 7-2 margin, but we're not going to give any guidance or any clarifying principle for future artists. I mean, how do we know how the florist in Washington, how the videographers, how the t-shirt makers, how other creative professionals, what are they supposed to do now with this opinion? This gave no guidance to other courts how to interpret other artistic professionals who may not want to participate in these types of religious ceremonies.
It's quite amazing. In other words, if the committee, if the Colorado committee had managed to hide its anti-religious prejudice, if it had buried this and kept their mouths shut, they basically might have gotten away with this.
They may have, and that was what I found so disappointing about Kennedy's opinion for the majority, is that he is just inviting future litigants to hide their animus and basically just be sneakier about it and say, we're not going to go on the record comparing you to the Holocaust. We are going to pretend to be very kind to you, and we're still going to find that you've breached the anti-discrimination law for public accommodation. We're just going to do it in a stealthier manner and then get up to the Supreme Court or whatever court in Colorado, of course, still has this clear bias, and we just won't have it as openly. So it's just inviting people to be sneakier about it, unfortunately.
I mean, it's pretty, when I heard that it was 7-2, I kind of thought that's really great. But then it bothers me that there are 2 judges, is Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sotomayor, I think, there's 2 judges who basically felt he should have been nailed anyway. It didn't matter. He's not only got to, it's not enough that gay people have the right to get married. Everybody has to agree that this is a wonderful thing. Is that pretty fairly what they said?
Yeah, and you know what was amazing about this is that Ginsburg and Sotomayor, I mean, for how just fact-based and clear this was, that there was such hostility against Jack by the commission, it's amazing to me that Ginsburg and Sotomayor didn't just join this and make it a 9-0, because now they're clearly showing their animus, and they're showing that they have a clear bias for the LGBT agenda by not joining in this opinion. And I found that really surprising that they were willing to do that, and not just say, you know what, we'll give him the win in this instance so we can come back later and say, hey, listen, we were fair to Jack Phillips, so now we're going to stick it to the Christian community. They can't say that now, and we will always have that opinion for that reason.
What's so disturbing to me about this is that, I'm to the left of the Dobson Institute, Dearly as I love them,
It's okay.
no,
Have me one more and we'll convince.
no, I mean, I'm an artist. I've worked with gay people all my life. I want them to live and be happy. I don't want to pass. It's not for me to tell them how to live, but this really does seem when institutes like the James Dobson Institute talk about the gay agenda, they're talking about what seems to be a target on religious people, a target on certain kinds of family life, traditional family life, and a target on free speech. And this kind of justifies them that there is this element in the gay community.
Yeah, and Dr. Dobson has been speaking for 40 plus years about the prevalence through the rise of the sexual revolution for things like abortion that have led to even more cases like Planned Parenthood versus Casey, Roe versus Wade, eventually getting into Obergefell. Because remember, we didn't find some kind of constitutional right that emanates from the vast penumbra. What the court did in Roe versus Wade is find a right to privacy that somehow is extended to cover other traditionally unlawful and criminal and definitely immoral activity. And that's what we've seen throughout the past 50 or 60 years. And that was really the foundation of the Obergefell decision. Because remember, Andrew, I mean, the law in all of the states, which by definition is a state sovereignty issue, the federal government cannot legislate on marriage or domestic relations, period, because of Article 1, Section 8. So not only is this a state issue, but the states had spoken and said, we are only going to recognize marriage between one man and one woman. That was equally applied to everyone. Everyone had the opportunity to marry someone of the opposite sex. And yet, the LGBT agenda has not only said we want equality, but now they want celebration, they want participation, they want Jack Phillips, they want you and me to be compelled to celebrate and to speak in support of their message. And that's why it's so dangerous and why people like Dr. Dobson and also our policy center with the Dobson Family Institute are making sure that we are protecting and preserving the fundamental rights that are pre-political. They don't come from the Constitution. They come from our Creator, and our Declaration recognizes that. Our Constitution is just supposed to preserve and protect that.
It is really amazing because a lot of people have a right to do a lot of things, but to legislate that I have to agree with them or celebrate what they do is absurd. I mean, it truly is an abrogation of my rights, just a free thought, let alone free speech. What did the conservatives, guys like Gorsuch and Thomas, say? What was their opinion?
Yeah, I wish that Thomas's concurrence, which was joined by Gorsuch, there was only 2 members of the court, they actually went into the free speech issue and said that Jack should have won, not just on this procedural issue, but really on the merits. And so they gave a very, very solid explanation of why this case should have been more broad and why the court should have commented on the protections that we find in the First Amendment. And so I wish that Justice Thomas's opinion had spoken for the majority here. But hopefully we'll see that in future cases.
It's amazing. I'm really glad you came on because I have to say it's worse than I thought. It's a real violation. I mean, I'm glad he didn't get nailed by the court, but it's still a terrible violation of our free speech rights. Jenna Ellis, the author of The Legal Basis for a Moral Constitution, a guide for Christians to understand America's current constitutional crisis. I would really like to hear more about this. I'd like to read it and I'd like to talk to you about it again. I hope you'll come back.
Yes, please. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot, John. Bye. Wow. Yeah. Like, what is wrong with these guys? It's like people are beginning to accept gay people. I think that's getting to be a very broadly held opinion. They're just wrong footing that. They're just making themselves, anathema. It's just so ugly and bullying and un-American. It really is. I'm embarrassed for them. I really am.